Welcome to The Hash, everyone, your daily beat on crypto and culture. My name is Naomi Brockwell, and I'm delighted to be joined by our other wonderful co-hosts. We have Jen Sanasie, Will Foxley, Ben Powers, and Zack Seward. Welcome to the show, guys. And we're going to kick off today by talking about Fireblocks and the huge demand for crypto custody services today. So, Zack, what have we got there?
All right, hear me out, guys. Crypto custody sounds boring, is actually really interesting. And we are seeing that manifest itself here and now. So at a time when Curve, another custodian, was purchased by PayPal, Fireblocks is raising a bunch of money because they think the opportunity is bigger if they're a standalone firm. So I guess I want to throw that first question. Crypto custody is interesting to Will. Are you interested in what custody means for the current Wall Street embrace of Bitcoin?
Always. I also love a turtleneck action we got going on up there. Really good looking, looking sharp. Custodying is really interesting because it's like the infrastructural background for how all these like puzzle pieces and the crypto and traditional finance world are going to like fit together at some point. At the very least, there's always like huge valuations thrown around with custodying because I guess ostensibly they get to hold the money and so they get to loan it out, get interest and like profit off of holding everyone else's crypto. So like I think the Curve valuation, what was that, Zack? It was really high in the hundreds of millions, right?
There was no valuation disclosed, but the Series C funding round was 133 million. So, whether this is another secret crypto unicorn, we do not know yet. But the funding round itself was pretty sizable.
But for Curve, when Curve was acquired by PayPal, it was like
Curve. Sorry, Curve. I thought you were talking about Fireblocks. Yeah, Curve. No purchase price was disclosed there. There was various media reports suggesting it was anywhere from 200 million to 500 million.
Yeah, so that to me, that's the interesting part. Is like there's always just so much money thrown at these things. Like custodying is kind of boring. It's just like a savings account or whatnot, and all the pieces behind the scene that no one interacts with. But these people are making bank. So that's interesting to me. I don't know if that's the answer you wanted.
No, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, we're having a bit of a crypto custodian arms race here. BitGo also reportedly turned down $750 million to be acquired by PayPal. So, clearly these firms are thinking that the opportunity is large. I was talking to Fireblocks yesterday in preparing this piece, and, they're serving something like 230 customers. Many of them are big financial institutions. We first reported that they were working with BNY Mellon on BNY Mellon's crypto custody play, and the CEO did confirm that yesterday, confirming the reporting that Ian Allison had done a couple of weeks ago. So, Ben, these are suddenly becoming a key piece of the market infrastructure, and I'm just curious for your general take on the crypto custody scene at present.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fundraising numbers are really interesting here in this regard. But I think too, so is them sort of deciding not to get acquired, or kind of going it alone, because it shows that that large list of customers, Zach, that you identified, they think there's more out there. And so what I would be curious about is, this action shows that they're hearing things potentially behind the scenes, and they might be having larger conversations that say, hey, other players and more players want to move into this. So that was kind of my takeaway here, because we talked about previously with Curb, companies trying to scoop up these crypto native acquisitions, and Fireblocks saying, no, we're not going to do that, means, like you said at the top, there's a bigger opportunity here in their mind.
Naomi, I saw your hand shoot up.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I have a question about what sort of regulations are around the ability for someone to custody assets on behalf of someone else. Because when you're looking at things like the crypto banks that they've set up in Wyoming, the special purpose depository institutes, they specifically say that, no rehypothecation is allowed. So they can't be fractional reserve. They can't loan out things. So does that mean that institutions like this get an advantage because they are able to rehypothecate, and they are able to custody these things and then potentially loan them out? Because I presume that they're going to be incentivizing people to run with them by providing interest. And I mean, they're going to be able to pay that interest by loaning out that other people's money. So is that going to put these institutions like we have in Wyoming at a disadvantage? Are more people going to be preferring services like this to going with an actual state chartered bank like we have in Wyoming? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that they don't do that, right? So they work with all the big crypto lenders. Fireblocks specifically mentioned that they work with Celsius, they work with BlockFi, they work with Genesis Capital. So they are providing the storage and transfer. They have a transfer network as well that connects all these networks. And my understanding is that they don't hold the assets and loan them out on behalf of their own business. They hold the assets on behalf of people who are lending them out and who are licensed to do so. But again, the custodian layer is sort of this behind the scenes infrastructure that is becoming increasingly key. So yeah, I think with the custodian stuff, it's often the first entry point for these big banks. I think we saw it with BNY Mellon, obviously, saying, hey, we're going to let customers hold crypto with us, BNY Mellon, but on the back end, it's likely Fireblocks providing the technological solutions. Jen, what's up?
Well, you kind of just answered my question. I was going to say BNY Mellon was a part of this Series C raise. And so is that not a partnership of sorts? While it's not Fireblocks partnering with BNY Mellon, what does them being a part of this raise actually mean?
Well, they are a strategic investor in the Series C, and I also asked CEO Michael Shaloff if those pesky media reports that they were working with BNY Mellon were true, and he said yes, they were true. So this is a strategic investment by one of Fireblocks' many clients in the institutional space.
And it looks like that BNY Mellon is just building out BTC custody products, looking into that. So does Fireblocks custody any other assets, or are they just in BTC as well?
It does indeed. They custody all sorts of assets. One of the interesting things that didn't make the piece is that, they can sort of be a secure rail for these big companies to participate in this ecosystem, right? So, it's not like BNY Mellon is going to turn on DeFi or NFTs tomorrow, but should they decide at some point that that's what they want to do, the technology could supply that solution. And actually, BNY Mellon hasn't really specified which additional cryptos it's going to custody beyond the presumptive Bitcoin. So I think they will have the chops to support other cryptos, and we're going to find out more as that thing gets launched in the coming months. So let's toss this thing. Who's next? Who's got it? Jump ball.
It's me.
Yeah.
All right. MetaKovan has been so hot in the headlines lately after buying Beeple's every days. We know that sold for $69 million. Now, before today, we had no idea who the person was behind the pseudonym, but now we know that it is Vignesh Sundaresan. So he's the CEO of Singaporean consulting firm Portkey Technologies. And he said that the whole point of revealing himself was to show other people of color that they could be patrons of the art world too. So I want to throw this to the group. I mean, there's a lot of people who are operating behind pseudonyms in the crypto world. What do you think this means for them? Naomi, I saw you throw your hand up.
Yeah, I just find it, I don't know. I find it amusing that he says, well, I reveal my identity because I want to show the world people of color can own art. It's like he's an alumni of Y Combinator. He's an incredibly successful person in the space. And yet his focus is going on, I want to show people that we can own art. It's like, show people how incredibly successful and amazing an entrepreneur you've been. You founded these companies that basically, sent Bitcoin ATMs all over the country. There's some really impressive stuff that this guy has done. Just digging into his backstory, it's very interesting for sure.
He definitely has a lot of accolades to his name, and I have to say, he went to university in Canada, and so I'm just gonna claim that for Canadians.
University.
We call that college down here. Yeah.
Sorry. He went to, it was Canadian, so university. But I think it's great. I mean, he spent $69 million on a piece of digital artwork. And so I think for people of color who aspire to do that in the future, it's just awesome to see someone who looks like them doing this. But Naomi, to your point, he is an amazing entrepreneur. So I think it's great that he's revealed himself. Do you think others are going to follow suit?
And buy really, really expensive NFTs that we don't even know the security of or whether they're even going to be available? The more I dig into NFTs, the more I'm just like, ooh, this is quicksand here, because you have to have a hash pointing to something where the NFT can be stored. You have one of these custodians go under, suddenly you've lost your NFT. That disappears because that's baked into the blockchain. You can't change that. So, it's I don't know. It's just this very interesting world. Obviously, I think the tech is going to evolve, but we're not there yet. And I personally wouldn't be spending $69 million, not just because I don't have $69 million. Maybe I would spend it if I did. I don't know. I guess I'll answer that, if I ever make a bunch of money one day. But it just seems like a lot of money to spend on this.
Ben, you had something to add?
I mean, for this guy who has is spending this amount of money and holds a huge amount of NFTs, I'm sure he's got backups running so that if a website or a marketplace goes down, they're not going to disappear. But that being said, I thought it was interesting that he sort of pointed towards crypto as a leveling mechanism in this blog post and talked about it as a way to deal with some structural inequalities in the world and articulated it in that frame. It'd be easy to just kind of say hey, I'm really rich, look at this. But he pointed to things like art and he pointed to things like crypto as a means for addressing mechanisms that we haven't sorted out in the world yet. And so I thought it was sort of refreshing to see him pull back to the larger framework rather than just saying, look at this, I spent a lot of money on it, in my mind.
Yeah, his story was super inspirational. He said in 2013 he had nothing, and then he discovered Bitcoin, and he's been able to build to where he is now. So that's awesome. Will, sorry I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. Interesting. Amy Castor, who's an independent journalist, she actually she called this before it happened. So I don't know if anyone else was on that.
The timing was a little.
She figured out. I don't know. I don't know if there was anything. Oh, tell me about that, Ben. What do you mean?
She published this. It was earlier this week, I think, and then this announcement comes out days later. I don't think the two things are necessarily unrelated.
Yeah, I think maybe just her reporting triggered him to come out and talk about his identity. But interesting that that there is always a way to figure out who's doing what on a blockchain system. So that's kind of my high level take with it. But interesting how she found that.
Yeah, I will mention, so Vignesh has been an early investor in a lot of different techs associated in the blockchain space. He was an early investor in Ethereum, an early investor in Decentraland, and he was an early investor in Tezos. And he cited these three on his website, sort of highlighting them, which is interesting because he says that Tezos is the most robust model yet for proof of stake tokens, which is super interesting.
I'm just still stuck on the personal, that moment of hitting buy on a $60 million purchase. I wish I could be in the room for that because, man, that is crazy. Can we just talk about that for a minute? Can anyone imagine doing that? clicking the $60 million buy button on the Christie's website with like.
I can't imagine having $69 million and then pushing a button to get rid of it.
Oh man, that's wild. All right, well, we'll think about it more during the break, and we will take a break, and then when we get back, we're gonna be talking about the feds, man. The feds, are they looking into Google's latest privacy push? We'll talk to Ben about that after the break. Thanks for watching The Hash.
Welcome back, and you're watching The Hash, where we discuss the latest and greatest in crypto news. And so the story I brought to the table today, I think is kind of interesting, but basically the feds are looking into Google's privacy push and removing cookies from the platform as potentially a sort of stepping stone in their antitrust actions against the company. So, group, what do you think about this? I'm going to dive into it more, but just rapid round of reactions off the top.
Well, this is very reminiscent of what happened with Facebook. So Facebook and Apple are in this ongoing feud, and Apple said, basically, I want to make privacy more transparent. I want people to know that they're being tracked across the internet. So we're going to have these pop-up labels. People can choose whether they want to opt in or not. And then Facebook came up and said, you're deliberately doing this. This is an antitrust case. You're hurting us. Our entire revenue model is built on privacy. But then at the end of the day, Apple is just raising, I think, the standards in the tech space and doing a really good service by providing more transparency in terms of privacy. Now, when it comes to Google, I'm not sure their motives are as pure. Apple has always been very much in favor of privacy. Google has not traditionally. And the immediate thing that came to mind when I heard that they were getting rid of third-party cookies was, what are they replacing it with? Because currently they make all of their revenue from people being able to track and advertise, and they get a cut of all of this. So it's like they wouldn't just shoot themselves in the foot and get rid of that. So Ben, I might throw this back to you because I know you have some ideas about perhaps nefarious loopholes there. Talk to us about what you think is going on there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that stood out to me about this story is it seemed like a really interesting incident of privacy being sort of weaponized in one way on sort of advertisers and other kind of data gathering companies. They're accusing Google of using privacy to kind of keep up a fence around its market share, which is huge in this because they say we can't do our jobs as effectively if you remove third-party cookies, but there are loopholes in other ways that Google will continue to kind of track data on customers. Meanwhile, Google, on the other hand, is saying, we're pushing privacy because we do value, the ability for people not to be tracked. And, there have been privacy concerns over Google for a while. So it's sort of like privacy has become this interesting tug of war between these two parties. And the fact that it's getting roped into this antitrust suit or action is just kind of fascinating. I think it's something we might see more of going forward, honestly, as privacy continues to be a value add for companies. The companies that sort of glom onto that and have been and profited off of having a lack of privacy are sure to get upset. So that was what stood out to me. That being said, with Google removing these cookies, there are a lot of sort of blockchain based and other, identity companies that are looking to get into this space in a way that's more sustainable, potentially, including maybe with Google.
Yeah, I mean, I just hate the antitrust aspect of it because I try not to use Google at all. I use Proton Mail. I use DuckDuckGo. It's to say that, well, people have to use Google, therefore it's not fair for them to dictate the terms and services on their platforms. Like, dudes, just use something else. There are plenty of other platforms out there. I try not to use any Google products at all. There are definitely options. So that bothers me. At the same time, I like that Google is stopping third-party cookies because I do think that is going to help us in this fight against the surveillance state and against tracking from large corporations. So I like that move. I'm just a bit skeptical. I wonder what's going to come in to replace it. As you said, Ben, I think that they're probably going to continue to do a lot of tracking themselves and maybe not consider themselves a third party if you're on their browser, etc. So we'll have to see what happens there. But in general, good move towards privacy potentially, and if people don't like it, maybe just advertise on other browsers and web search engines.
Naomi, I always have to counter you on that because I really don't believe that people realize that there are options outside of Google. And Google is so convenient. It connects everything. It feels like everybody uses Google. I think antitrust laws are necessary for the general
because people
public.
Can't do their own research. I mean, I think that's crazy. I think that no, but so people should be pandered to because they don't go out of their way to do research. Then sure, just use Google, but then understand they have terms and services on their platform. But don't force Google to do things because people are too stupid to do their own research. I think that's crazy. There are options out there, and maybe we'll start to hear about them if Google does bad things. Instead of getting the government in and saying, well, you have to solve this, why don't say Google's doing bad things? This is a good chance to educate people about the alternatives. These are other things you can use that are better for your privacy. I think that's a great move because at the end of the day, the government isn't going to step in and help our privacy. That is not in their best interest. So the only way that we move people onto better services is this educational process. And we take this as an opportunity and say, this is not a good product. Let's people know, let's take the chance to let people know what's better. I think that's a great thing.
Well, I will say Google's convenient until you turn on a VPN and they make me use CAPTCHA every time I want to do a Google search on my phone. So that's something I get frustrated by. That being said, Naomi, I think up next you've actually got a piece of government legislation for us to discuss.
Government, let's talk about it. All right, so Kentucky state legislator has given us final approval on 2 proposed bills that would introduce energy and tax breaks for crypto mining operations. And that in itself was kind of interesting to me. So I dug into it a little more. Basically, under the proposed law, sales tax obligations from electricity purchased for crypto mining will be removed. And I was wondering, why are they doing that for the crypto space? It seemed strange. I didn't realize that there are actually all kinds of sales tax exemptions all over the country for certain types of industries. This is a very commonplace thing that's now just being applied to the crypto space. Like example, Massachusetts, if you're a small business, you might be exempt from paying sales tax on your electricity and other utilities as well. So I want to throw this to the group. What are your thoughts on this bill going through? Do you think that it's going to achieve what the people who put it forward want, which is basically to bring more crypto miners to Kentucky and create jobs?
Yeah, I can say that really quick. Yeah, so it's interesting that they're doing that. And I think that you'll see more of it along the way as some states grapple with losing tech jobs, or some states grapple with losing manufacturing jobs. We'll see just these newer industries that can easily bring in money to the state. There'll be tax incentives for that. Another larger issue that's kind of interesting here is as states in the US kind of take a pro-crypto or anti-crypto state, they'll necessarily kind of conflict with whatever the federal level is doing. So you could kind of have a future where we have a Kentucky that's extremely pro-crypto, maybe even puts crypto into like a state treasury, but then the Federal Reserve is saying, we don't like Bitcoin, or the US Treasury is saying, we don't like Bitcoin, and we want there to be some regulations around it. So I think in the next 10 years, as Bitcoin just becomes a sovereign asset and a store of value, as that thesis continues to grow, we're going to see some conflict between the feds and the states and maybe even localities. I'll toss it over to Zach.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of a crypto mining boom in North America, and I think it's interesting to see where this is taking place so far. Texas seems to sort of be controlling a lot of the momentum around U.S. crypto mining right now, basically based on I believe, fairly cheap electricity rates in the state. It has its own special grid, and that had problems during a recent winter storm. But this move by Kentucky feels very like Mountain West to me. Like Wyoming and Montana are kind of like leading the charge on state level legislation for crypto stuff. I'd be interested to see if it gets people to set up shop there. My understanding is that crypto mining operations don't generate a ton of jobs. So I don't know, if people setting up shop in Kentucky necessarily equates with a lot of jobs following these operations. But it will be interesting to see what the geography of Bitcoin in the U.S. looks like, again, as various state houses put incentives in front of these companies. Ben, I saw you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I can't help but think about the timing of this, right? This is happening again amidst a bull run with Bitcoin and various other assets. And so that feels a little bit not even suspect, but just, let's say coincidental. And Zach, I think to your point, right? Like if you're passing this and saying it's going to create new jobs, like that kind of shows a little bit maybe of a lack of understanding of some of these issues. We were joking before the show and I was saying, look, I want to like interview the 19 people in the Kentucky Senate who voted against this and just ask them why. I'm curious about what the mechanisms and thought processes were around passing or not passing this bill. But Will, I think to your point too, and maybe a boom in mining in North America, there's like a computer chip shortage in the US right now, like due to the pandemic and due to supply chain issues. Like we're starting to talk about these, and I believe the US is starting to look at it as like a national security issue. And so I wonder how that might impact mining, particularly given the mass amount of mining that's going on in China and some other places, whether crypto more generally, and particularly mining, maybe starts to get looped into more geopolitical kind of tensions. I think that's something we might start to see. And if mining continues to grow in the US, I'd be curious about how that might get looped in, because I do think that's coming in the future.
One thing I will say on the jobs front. Sorry, go ahead, Will.
My quick response would be, I don't know an issue that the U.S. doesn't consider a national security threat nowadays. So I don't understand. There's probably nothing. I think. Yeah, go ahead.
I only say that to say that they're going to be looking at this particularly closely. As soon as that label gets tossed into some arena, that means that the U.S. is looking at it really close and is probably going to step in some capacity or keep an eye on. So just saying it's going to be an increased amount of tension, but your point is well taken. That is absolutely true.
I'll mention that, like when we're talking about boosting jobs, etc. Well, even if it doesn't boost jobs, having mining there, I would presume that miners would have to pay income tax on Bitcoins mined. I actually don't know how that worked, but I'm going to guess that's the government's going to want a share of that. So if that leads to more tax revenue, right, that leads to more revenue for the state. That might be another reason why they're doing this.
Well, this
that goes back to sort of the. No, go ahead, Jen.
Go for it, Ben. I was just gonna say that just points to, again, the government and regulators not really understanding the things that they are trying to kind of put in place and regulate. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, and this just also throws back to that Maryland law that was passed about taxing the ad revenue at tech companies. Municipalities are looking for replaced tax revenue right now, given the way that it's just sort of cratered in the pandemic. So, Amy, to your point, maybe this is another way of looking at this and trying to raise things. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, as you said, what's going to happen there, whether people are going to go flocking there, because unless Kentucky has super cheap electricity, I don't see other incentives just because they don't have to pay an additional tax on top of it. If electricity itself isn't that cheap, I actually don't know about Kentucky. Maybe there's lots of solar energy there that they could take advantage of, but it does seem like other countries may have an advantage over America.
Wow, some shade to Kentucky right there. But we're going to move away from the U.S. into Southeast Asia. We're talking about a new stablecoin issue that the central bank there is threatening against bot-denominated stablecoins. So this kind of reflects back on some reporting from Brady Dale, who talked about Terra's new stablecoin that's trying to kind of take away from MakerDAO's market cap with its DAI stablecoin. And these stablecoins are crypto-backed, so they're collateralized with other crypto assets like Ether or the basic attention token or whatnot. And Terra, which is a very, very popular cryptocurrency platform in South Korea, issued its own DAI-esque stablecoin. I forget what it's called. It's like THT or something like that. I'll have Zach correct me in like 2 seconds here, though.
It's UST. It's UST.
Okay.
It's not THC.
Anyways.
That's something else.
I said THC.
I think you did.
I said THT.
Sure you did, dude.
Sure you did. Yeah, we believe
Whatever.
you.
I'm not listening to you. So essentially, the central bank here. Yeah, no, I don't listen to editors. The central bank here is basically kind of throwing a shot across the bow or shooting a shot across the bow for stablecoin issuers. They're saying, hey, you're breaking our currency laws with issuing stablecoins that are denominated in our local currency. And they're just thinking that there could be criminal activity with that stablecoin, or it could mess up how currency kind of works within that country itself. The Terra issuer, they tweeted a little bit about it and the people who created the token, but they kind of give like a mainstream crypto take, which is, we made it, but we don't control it, so it's not our problem. But I'm going to toss it down to Zack for a little bit more high-level take on what this token's even called.
You're right. It is THD. Like the Thai version is THD, and USD is the US dollar version. And there's other ones for other currencies that are synthetic and pegged to the value of these local currencies. I mean, I think to me it reminds me of like the Libra thing, like in June 2019, right, when lawmakers really got up in arms about these private currencies potentially unseating the work of sovereign nations on this monetary front. So the fact that I think Thai regulators are paying significant attention to Terraform Labs and their work with Terra. There's so many, like, first of all, there's just so many names like in the Terra project. So it's like there's Terraform Labs, there's Terra. It's like Chai. There's all these names. So anyway, like I feel similarly confused, Will. But the fact that they're taking this seriously, I think, goes to show that this is a project that more people should be aware of, right? It's actually found quite a good foothold in several Asian markets, and in the West, I think people are starting to pay attention as they make these sort of splashy rollouts in the DeFi space. Yeah, that's my take. It felt reminiscent of Libra, and maybe these stable coins are the new front line for some of these regulatory proclamations.
New world. Except having a decentralized. So go ahead, Ben.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting because we know Thailand's experimenting with CBDC and exploring options around that. So I wonder what that might have to do with this as well, just in terms of maybe a worry about information just flooding the market about their own currency that they will control, and worried about competition in that regard.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And talking back to what happened with Libra, like, it was fascinating that this is how crypto really came into mainstream discourse. It was with Libra. We didn't have hearings on crypto before this. It was the Libra that got people talking. And that is because Facebook is huge, and they could have potentially put together something that would have been a real threat to the US dollar. And although Bitcoin already was proving itself to be a real threat, Facebook was centralized, which means the difference between something that they could bring to a hearing and something that they couldn't. Because they can't just say, well, we're going to bring the creator of Bitcoin in and talk about the Bitcoin CEO and the company and what we can do about this. It doesn't exist. And so they have to focus on these centralized players. And I think that it's an interesting point you bring up about stable coins being the next thing that they focus on, because a lot of stable coins have a counterparty, right? So when you have that centralized bank that has to hold your asset in order to give you a digitized version, you suddenly have a centralized party that you can bring to a hearing, you can target, you can shut down. Now, obviously, when you have these decentralized ones, that makes it a little bit more tricky because there is no company that's holding any assets. It's a smart contract. I'm not sure how they're going to handle this. I'll throw it to you guys. Ben, I saw your hand go up. How are they going to handle the decentralized world of stablecoins?
I'm going to pass on that one and jump in with the quick comment I had that it was just a shame that sort of stablecoins got introduced to the world sort of on the back of Facebook, as you mentioned. I think that really sort of had a lot of government representatives, particularly in the US, come out against it sort of as a knee-jerk reaction. I believe it was off the back of one of Facebook's many scandals that this was introduced, and raised a lot of people up to say, like, hold on. So I think that shading had something to do with it. And I think that, if that had not been the case, maybe governments would be thinking about stablecoins in a different way.
Yeah, I can take Naomi's question really quick. So I think what's going to happen is just going to be like a total butchering. That's my take. And that maybe you'd agree with it. Like, the government will try to enforce some action against smart contracts, but they don't know how to. So we saw in the US, some specialists for a congresswoman tried to come up with some law work around how to address the stablecoin market. And they said that the Ethereum Foundation needed to get a money transmitter's license for the Ethereum network, which of course is just ridiculous given that the Ethereum Foundation basically only is working on ETH2 at this point, and they're not doing anything else besides that. Anyone can launch a smart contract and have stablecoins working on it within a few days. Like, even you yourself on a laptop watching this could do that if you have all the tools in front of you. So I think they'll butcher it. We'll see what it looks like. Hopefully it's not too painful in the future.
All right, on a call for peace and harmony in the world, we will end the hash for Thursday, March 18th. This is the part where I say what's next. We have All About Bitcoin at 3 p.m. today, which is cool. But tomorrow at 9 a.m., we have Anthony Scaramucci, the Mooch, is on First Mover tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Always an entertaining interview as he has seemingly dived down the Bitcoin rabbit hole in recent months. So tune in. It'll be fun. And then after that, we'll be on the hash at noon. So that's cool too. Well, thanks for doing it.
Cool
I'm Zack. We got Ben, we got Jim, we got Naomi, we got Will. We're staying cool. We're loving life. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the hash. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.